Greetings, welcome to the Haas Media Studio, and today we're going to talk a little bit about using microphones. Most of the great sounds that exist were captured on a microphone. Now, I know a lot of folks these days don't really need microphones. You can actually make lots of music, make lots of recordings. You can have an entire professional career without ever touching a microphone at this day and age, which is, it's kind of cool if you think about it. But at the same time, it's an amazing art, the act of capturing something on a microphone, because there's just so many aspects to this situation. There's just so many elements that come into play about it. The act of placing a microphone on an instrument. So we have to think about this for a second. What is the instrument? Or is it a stringed instrument? Is it a horned instrument? Is it a percussive instrument? What is the instrument, and where does the sound radiate from? A lot of times with a guitar, you've got the sound comes from the strings itself, but also comes from the sound hole and from the resonation of the top of the guitar. From the piano, it comes from all over the piano. It comes from the inside of the piano. It comes from the action of the piano. There's lots of things happening with the piano as far as where sound is coming from. With a vocal, it's fairly obvious. It's coming from the mouth. So we have this column of air that we have to sort of manage with the microphone. It's not just sound radiating, but there's actual air hitting the microphone. That's another deal altogether. So when we're starting to think about putting a microphone on our instruments, we got to really take into consideration, where is the sound coming from? Once we sort of figure that out, we have to sit and think about where does the sound of the instrument come that's best for your needs. All right, we have a piano here, for instance. If I'm doing a solo piano, if I'm just going to have me on the piano and it's just going to be nothing but the piano, then this thing is going to be responsible for all of the music. So I'm going to want to make decisions that have the maximum amount of frequency range and sensitivity possible. But if the piano is just going to be part of an ensemble, if it's just going to be playing along with a bunch of electric guitar players and drums and basses and hoo-ha's and didgeridoos and what have you, it's a whole other deal. We can have a narrower space for that, and we can define that. So we would use a different mic technique, we would use a different microphone, and we'd use a different placement for all of these different situations between just a solo piano and a piano as part of an ensemble. So we got a lot to think about. How close do we want to put the microphone? Because here's one of the realities about microphones. The closer that we put a microphone to the sound source, we have this thing called proximity effect, which means that we will get more low-end information. And it has a lot to do with frequency waves and how microphones operate. But when we get a microphone close to something, we will get the proximity effect. We'll get more low-end. So if we need to get more low-end from an instrument, that's exactly what we'll do. If we want to think about the proximity effect, we're going to get it really close. If we don't want that effect, we're going to get it further away. So also, do we want this sound to be dry? Do we want to just get the sound itself? Do we want the sound radiating off of the walls in any way to get some sound out of it? There's a big difference between a dry sound and a sound filling a reverberant space. So where do you place the microphone? We have also what we call the inverse square, which is if we double the distance of microphone from the source, we're going to drop minus 6 dBs for every time we double that distance. So we have to take that into consideration. The further we get the microphone away, the less of the sound we're going to get. So we have to find a spot between either very close, if that's what we want, or a little further away, or everything has to come into consideration. What is the sound we're trying to get? So the other thing that we have to think about, how sensitive the microphone is. Microphones have different sensitivities. Our dynamic microphones are less sensitive than our condenser microphones. So we have, depending on the instrument, for instance, if we have an instrument like the piano here, and we want to have very quiet, very nice reading of very, very quiet information. So we're going to want to have a microphone that is good at doing that. If we're playing really hard on this piano as Jerry Lee Lewis and we're going to set the thing on fire later, we might actually think about a dynamic mic and put that up there and let him wail on it and not worry about it. We don't need sensitivity for heavy-duty rock and roll. So we have to think about microphone sensitivity. What kind of microphone? Condensers are more sensitive than dynamics in general. Also, polar patterns. Microphones have different patterns that they are set to be able to receive information. We have cardioid patterns that are more directional in front of the microphone. We have omni patterns that pick up all around the microphone. We have figure 8 patterns that get the front of the microphone and the back of the microphone and reject the sides. We have lots of options here with the microphone as well. So the polar pattern, how much of the information outside of the instrument are we trying to capture? And here's the thing about microphones, okay? Because everybody that builds a microphone up to a certain point, well, most people anyway, they make that microphone basically to make anything sound good. I don't think most microphone designers really think, hey, I'm going to make this just perfect for hi-hat, or I'm going to make this just perfect for acoustic guitar. Well, maybe they do nowadays, but I am of the mind that most people try to make a microphone that's perfect, that does everything great, and does it for a good price. So every microphone is different, and it has different qualities and characteristics. They're almost like people, and different brands of microphones, different makes of microphones, give you lots of different kinds of opportunities. So frequency responses from the microphones. Once you get to know your microphones better, you'll sort of be able to reach for the right microphone. And that's part of what we're here today to do for you. And I've taken all the best microphones that I have here at the Haas studio. I picked them out, mostly condenser mics, I don't have any dynamics up here. And you see, you can record a piano with a dynamic microphone. It's perfectly fine. Some of these work great for that. But for this particular experiment, we're going to stick with the condensers because you can have too many options sometimes too. So anyways, we have today a piano. I've got a bunch of microphones in here. And what I'm trying to do here today is give you a chance to hear the differences between all these different microphones' qualities. They have very different personalities. So I've placed all these microphones pretty much as close as I can to the same place in the piano. Pretty much centrally located in the piano. It's looking at the action, and all the microphones are as close together in the same area as possible. And it's going to be a little bit heavy on the hammers. I've got this, the microphones are really up inside of the piano, and it's looking at the piano action. So one of the things I'm looking for in this piano sort of shootout, if you will. Well, how will these respond sonically to the piano? Which ones of these like the sound of the piano the most? And then which ones of them can take the transients the best? Which ones like to get the hammers? So that's why I've got them closer to the hammers, so I can sort of get a sort of a transient check on this. The process here is that we're going to test all these microphones first, just in this one position, and then once we've made some decisions about which microphones that we like, then we're going to try some different positionings of the microphones to then decide where to put the mics. Now, if you look very closely, you can see I've got a bunch of mics in there. I've got a KSM32 Shure, I've got an AKG 414, I've got an Audio-Technica 4050, I've got a Royer 121 ribbon mic right there in the middle, I've got a Schoeps MK5, I've got a KM184 Neumann, and I've got a Neumann 187 hulking over the whole bunch there. So I've got a bunch of mics there. They're all kind of looking at the same place. But as you can see, it's just really right there in the middle of the piano. Everything's sort of looking down about 45-degree angle towards the action of the piano. So they're sort of going to get a good read of it. And let's get over here so you can see how far away these are. And you can see they're all pretty well I'd say about 2 feet from the action, and they're all pointing at the action. So, all right, it's quite a mess I have in here, but I got them all in there. All of these microphones are in cardioid. None of them are in Omni, except of course the Royer, which is a ribbon mic. It is in figure 8, so it's going to also be reading on the back of it. Let me also show you what I got going here to the wall. I've got the microphones going to the top row of our microphone inputs on the box, which these are our mic pre inputs. So these go straight to mic pre's on the board. The other thing I have out here is I have one of our red boxes for headphones, this right here. And this box right here, we just plug this into the stereo cue out on the wall panel, and what this is going to give us is whatever is on the DAW, whatever the mix on the DAW is, comes out of this box into these 4 outputs. You can have 4 headphone outputs, and that's cool, but that doesn't give us any kind of agency with headphones. We have another system for that. We'll show you later. I'm going to go inside and set up the session, and then we're going to come back out here, and I'm going to play, I've got a sort of a retinue of piano things where we're going to sort of test all the different frequencies of the piano at different levels. I'm going to do a little rock and roll so we can sort of get a sense of the attack of the piano. I'm just going to run it through a little test that I've devised for piano so we can really sort of find out what these microphones are capable of doing for a piano. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so I've got piano tracks here. I've got 7 microphones recorded, and I've gone ahead and made them nice and color-coded for you. How did I do that? Let me just show you real quick. I go over to the side here to the left of my name of my track, click into this colored area here, and I get one of these up here, and I can make a nice selection of colors, and then it can also have that color the track itself in saturation mode. If I turn this part on, color coding options, lots of nice colors to do that. And I've also gone ahead and sort of semi-normalized them. When I recorded them, I actually did a pretty good job of recording them all at the same level, but I did a little bit of changing here. You may notice down here at the bottom, my KSM 32, I had to jump it up plus 1.7 dB, also the 4050, and 0.9 dB for the Sheps. So if you look over here, again, on the left side, in the left-hand bottom corner of your clip, you'll see a dB meter here, and this is where we do most of our mixing, folks. I'll tell you right now, when we do mixing in Pro Tools, we start here and we get our levels here before we even start messing with the faders. So get used to using this as much as you can right off the bat. I've already just done it to go ahead and normalize things, but yeah, you can just grab onto this and make them somewhat quieter and louder. And I've just gone up here to plus 0.9 dB. And if you look at all these waveforms, they look pretty even. Maybe the 184 looks a little soft, but then it gets loud over here in the middle part. So I don't want to turn that up and then turn up those loud parts. That microphone is obviously more sensitive, has a larger range of sensitivity. We can sort of learn a lot about our microphones just by looking at these waveforms, because they all see pretty much the same thing. Well, pretty much. They can't the exact same thing. Physically, can't do that. But you can see where certain notes got more love than others when we did the octaves. We went all the way up to the top and then went to the bottom again. Because all of these are pretty valid, actually. You can record a piano with any of these microphones and get a result that you would be happy with if that was your result that you were looking for. But they all have a unique character. It becomes pretty obvious once you start listening to them and soloing back and forth. I've got the rock and roll section, I've got the octave section, I've got the soft section, and we're just going to listen to each of the pianos in each section so we can kind of get a feel for that. When I'm soloing, usually I can add up solos and they latch. How did I get it to this point where they solo individually, which is the perfect way to monitor these and listen to these individually? That's easy. I go to options up at the top here. I go down to solo mode. And usually we're going to be in latch. This is going to be latch, so we can usually just solo these up like this. We can solo and add up solos. But if we just want to be able to do comparison shopping, which is what we're doing a whole heck of a lot of here, we're going to put this into XOR, cancels previous solo. So listen to the rock section one microphone at a time and just make notes. Sort of listen for yourself and think about it. And I'm probably going to make a few comments as it goes by, just because I kind of like to do that sort of thing. Anyways, let's listen. Starting with the Sheps. So that's got a great attack to it. It's got a nice tone. The high end is good for the Sheps. That's a really good one. I'm just going to let them run through. Here we go. Here's the ribbon. A lot less high end. Sounds a little muffled, doesn't it? Let's hear the Neumann. KM184. It's got more high end to it. also got some nice low end too. Not a bad choice, really. Nice little character to it. Not bad. All right, let's check out the 414. I'm gonna make a shorter run here. Let's just sort of go halfway into the middle of this so we don't have to hear the whole thing. So here's the 414. Let's also go on the hammers. A little dull on the top. Let's hear the 180. Let's hear the 87. Same deal. It's got a funny bump to it. So the Neumann really gets a lot of the transients really well. Let's hear the 4050. Pretty bassy. Let's hear the KM32 some. An interesting character. Nice transients though. Since we're really focusing on the hammers of the piano, I should really be able to get a good read on the attack of the piano. And these really reveal the character to me of the microphones. Also, since we have an instrument that has so much frequency range to it, this can really expose what the microphones can do. So I want to do one more little run. I'm just going to start from the top here, and I'm just going to go dancing through them so you can now sort of hear them a little more quickly refer to each other. So I'm going to start with the Sheps again. I'm going to go down the line. That probably sort of gives you some idea of how they compare to each other now, how each of them sounds distinctly different from each other. And it's really amazing how each microphone has this distinct character, and yet it's very much the piano. So now it comes down to, what's your flavor? What flavor do you want from a microphone? Do you want it to really capture those transients when I'm just playing hard like this? Because this is kind of hard playing. I mean, not really super hard playing, but it's pretty hard playing. So this is really piano at its fullest with the full range of it. And this kind of gives us a good test for the piano. So I want to try to hear the octaves now. I'm going to start with the Sheps. Here's a Royer. .184. .414. U87. .4050. KSM32. Back to the Sheps. So you probably heard a lot of different sound there when we jump from different mic to mic, and I try to make sure we could all hear all the notes, and you could get a sense of what was going on with the transients, with the frequency response, with the level response. And you can see that the KSM-32 just seems to lose a lot of the high stuff. Pretty sure it's actually closer to that end of the piano. I find myself reaching more towards the Sheps because it has a real clear sound to it. The low end doesn't really thump up so much on that. The Royer's a little too dull for me. The KM-184 actually sounds quite nice. Actually, I really find that to be a pretty nice coherent sound. The 414 also has a little more transient response for me. The U87, oddly enough, being our most expensive microphone, has a weird kind of mid-range thing I can't quite figure out, but it responds to the transients really well, I think. The 4050 has a real woofy, bassy sound to it, and the KSM-32 just not quite there. So that's my read on hearing this test so far, and that's why I like to have all the microphones like this and doing the same thing. And let's try to check out the big chords through each one of them. Ships. And ribbon. And 184. .14. U87. Okay, 4050. That bass thing. KM-32. All right, here's our quiet stuff. See if we still get good transient response from the microphone, or does it get duller? How does it respond to the lower level stuff? And do the frequencies still happen the way we want them to? We'll get a feel for each of these quiet ones here as we go. Start with the Sheps. Here's the ribbon. It's picking up some crazy stuff there. Neumann, K184. .414. Let's go to the 87 when it goes to the top here. And 4050 now. See, this sound has a little weirder knock to it. I find myself liking certain microphones more than others on the low level stuff, and it tends to be still kind of the same microphones, and it still comes out to be more the Sheps, the 184, the 414, sometimes the U87. And right now the other ones are sort of, they kind of don't quite, there's certain moments that they don't quite make it for me. Let's hear this batch here, starting with the Sheps. Okay, the ribbon. Okay, 184. .414. U87. $40.50. KSM32. I don't know about you, but I hear 7 different sounding pianos when I hear those microphones. It's the same piano, and the microphones are still pretty much in the same place, looking at the same thing, but I just hear such differences between those things. I defer to your listening ability and judgment to sort of hear those differences and make some decisions yourself to go, ooh, I like this, I like that better. So this is really what we do. We put microphones in front of instruments, we record them, we listen to them, and we go, yes and no. Yes, no. And that's what we're doing right now. Last but not least, let's hear this last little bit over here, starting with the Sheps. Really quiet. Ribbon, okay, and the ribbon. And 184. $414. Nice bass response on the 414. And a little quiet. This is the Neumann. Sorry, I should say so. Here's the 4050. And last but not least, or probably least, the KSM32. These microphones are all good choices. My personal choice generally tends towards the Sheps. I find the Sheps to have sort of a real sort of flatness in the way that they respond to frequencies, and it has a good high-end response in a way that the other microphones don't, and it also has a very quick response on the transients. And those are the things I'm looking for with the piano a lot of times, because I want the microphone to really capture all the nuance of the piano. Now with rock and roll, I could actually think about using one of these other microphones, and although the Sheps sounded good, I could probably reach for one of these other microphones and dial in a little EQ on it and have it fit with a rock and roll situation pretty well if I needed to. It comes to taste. I have 7 very good flavors here to choose from. So here's phase 2 of our piano miking extravaganza today. And this time we're just going to try to sort of get some idea of better positions and places to record from the piano. So we've tried out all these different microphones. We've come to some conclusions about which microphones we might like to use for a piano. So for this particular exercise, I've gone ahead and gotten 4 of our 414s, and I've spread those out. I've got a couple of experiments going here, so let me explain to you what's going on here. All right, first of all, I've got a 414 right here. This is sort of looking at the action again, just like we did earlier. So it's a sort of a 45-degree angle looking at the action. I've got this other 414 right here outside of the piano, sort of looking into the piano. I got another 414 right here looking at the high bridge, just sitting over where the strings go over the bridge. Because the piano bridge, that's where a lot of stuff is happening. There's a transfer of energy happening from the string to the soundboard right at that point. So that's actually a really good point to capture the sound. So I've got a 414, again, at the high bridge and at the low bridge down here. So I got one of each there. Then I went ahead and decided, well, let's do a little omni check too, because I got a couple of Sheps on the piano. And I got them right next to each other, right here in the middle. Right, these two guys here, they're the same microphone. One of them is in cardioid, and one of them is in omni. So I want to sort of get a chance to listen to the difference between omni and cardioid with the same microphone in the same position. Because one of the things we learned about piano is that A lot of times Omni mics are really good for getting the low end and stuff. So I'm doing a little check with the Sheps over here, and then all the way down here at the bottom, I read a book the other day where a guy was talking about how they like to use U87 right there, just put it on a piece of foam right at the bottom of the piano for Norah Jones piano stuff. I thought, well, that's a pretty cool idea. So I went ahead and pulled an 87 over the bass bridge right there at the base of the piano, and I went ahead and threw a 40-50 down there too, so we could compare those two. So we got a couple of different looks at the piano. We've got 4 different looks for the same microphone. Now that's sort of one of the things I wanted to try to make happen, so we could really hear the difference of positioning with the same microphone and the same instrument. I'm going to go in and get the session set up, and then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to play a song that I like to play that's going to sort of get through this, and we're going to hear all these microphones. I've got all the microphones in this order, going from the top to the bottom. I've got the 414 in the action position, looking right directly at the hammers, like we did the first batch of microphones. Here's the next one down is the 414 that's on the outside, looking into the piano from about a foot out. Then we have our high bridge, which is the 414 is looking right about 6 inches over the high bridge on the piano. The low bridge, same distance with the 414. So we have 4 really very interesting looks at the piano with the 414. Then we have the U87 that we stuck down there at the bass bridge, down at the bottom, and the 40-50 that we stuck right next to it, which is, so we're going to have a little comparison to see if we like those microphones, the way that they sound, and then we're going to actually try to bring them together with some of the other pairs to see if that enhances the situation much. Then we have our 2 Sheps. We have one of them's in cardioid and one of them's in Omni, and they're right next to each other, so they're going to really get almost an identical read of the piano from outside of the piano, except one of them's going to have a tighter polar pattern and one of them's going to be an Omni. So we're going to really get a good chance to hear the difference between cardioid and Omni for a Sheps in this piano environment. So got a lot of really cool looks here. Also, those can be pulled into different combinations with these other microphones. So let's hear what we got. I'm going to start from the top. First, let's just compare the action to the outside of the 414. Let's just sort of go back and forth between those two and hear what's happening with those here at the top. Outside. So listen for the transients, listen for how the attack of the piano. The action is going to give you more attack, the outside is going to certainly have less attack. So listen between the two, and listen to the quiet part here, starting with the action. And outside. Really miss it on the quiet stuff. Inside. Outside. Inside. Outside. Inside. Outside. Inside. You can really hear the difference between those two mic placements. You can really hear how when the one that's in the action is capturing the attack of the transients. There's a distinct high frequency information transfer happening there. When we get to the outside, all of a sudden the sound of the piano becomes just a little bit washier. It sounds more like a coherent instrument, but then we lose some of that attack. But we still have a lot of the tone. It's a slightly different tone too, though. So you could really make a case for either one depending on what you needed to have. Do you need that attack? Get it closer to the hammers. But if you want that sense of the piano as an instrument, bring it back outside. So let's listen to the two of them really together, and I'm going to hard pan them left and right. This might be a way to approach this sound. Here, let's put those two together and let me solo them. And that's with the action on one side and the outside on the right side. It's kind of a nice sound, actually. It's kind of phase coherent. The attack sounds a little more to the, actually to the left side. Yeah. Okay, I can take it out of, I'm going to try taking it out of phase with the trim. Let's see if I take the outside out of phase with the inside. And out of phase. Interesting what happens. So it's kind of cool is when I have them together like that, I kind of like it hard panned left and right. It makes the attack a little bit to the left. It makes a very nice sound to me, actually, having the action on the left, the outside mic on the right, and not having it out of phase. When they're out of phase, all of a sudden they really become separated. But when I don't have the trim on, all of a sudden they still sort of stay in the same place. I could actually use that piano sound. That would work for me. Let's look at the high and low bridge, starting from the top here. And we're going to go back and forth between the high and the low bridge. That's the high bridge, low bridge, high bridge, low bridge. That low bridge sounds good, doesn't it? Bridge. So I want to go ahead and bring those back, and I'm going to go ahead and hard pan those. And let's listen to those together real quick, because I think that's a sound that I personally kind of like to have, is the high and low bridge left and right. Again, let me get out of my solo mode business here. Back to the latch. And let's bring them together. Let's have the high bridge over on the right and the low bridge on the left. If we want to hear a stereo for the piano, do we want to hear high notes to the right, low notes to the left? That's your call. So let's hear this real quick. It's a very nice sound, and there's a real warmth to it. Let's listen again, though, for the transients. Are we getting really good transients? Not so much like we were with this guy over here. Our action one. So the great thing about the bridge is that we get more tone from these microphones and just overall just warmth and nice tone, but all of a sudden we end up sacrificing that nice attack. So maybe we will pick one of these action microphones and mix that in with the bridges later. We'll try that, and that's probably going to be even the best way of all. While we're listening to this, though, let's go ahead and move on down to the U87 bass. Let's do a little bass check on these bass mics. We'll check this over in the chorus. U87 bass. 40-50 bass. That's U87. I feel like that's giving me more something I might use. And these mics are in pretty much in the same position, so we're getting a real contrast between those two microphones. Looking at the bass bridge right off the bat, I don't know if I'm going to like this because I probably wouldn't use this mic by itself. I'd want to use this in conjunction with the other microphones, but it might be what I want to use. Between the two, I think I'm going to probably lean towards the U87 because I don't feel like the 4050 has a funny sort of mid-range honkiness to it that I'm not particularly liking for this song and this situation. So let's move on to the Sheps, and let's listen to the Sheps from the top. All right, and this is the cardioid, and we're going to go back and forth between the cardioid and the omni. What I would recommend listening for is frequency. Does the omni all of a sudden have more frequency, less frequency? Is there a difference between the two? Let's just see if we can even detect the difference between the cardioid sheps and the omni sheps. Here we go, starting with the cardioid. Omni. Into the cardioid. Omni. You hear the low end? That's the cardioid. Let's just compare it on the quiet stuff. Cardioid. Omni. Cardioid. Cardioid. Omni. So I'm sure you're hearing all of a sudden when we go into the Omni mic, all of a sudden the low end just jumps up into the picture more. That's one of the things about Omni mics, which these sheps especially, you will get more of that low end with the Omni. Could be a nice thing. Or maybe we're just looking for the sheps to give us a little bit of little crispiness to the sound. So what we might try here at this point, I'm going to go ahead and bring back the bridge mics. And let's switch over to mutes here. And I'm going to bring back the bridge mics, left and right. Let's check that out. Make sure they're left and right. Yeah, they are. And I'm going to try out adding now some of these other microphones, like the 414 Action. I'm just going to start adding in some of these other mics. And we'll see if we like some of the possibilities. And I guess what I'm looking for here, again, since we decided that the bridge just had wonderful tonality to it and had a nice presence to it, maybe what we are looking for this third mic is more bass or more high end. One or the other or both. Let's see if we can find that. By themselves. Bring in the 414 action. Take it out. Bring it back in. That actually helps. That sort of adds that hammer presence. So that would be a good choice. Let's do the outside one. It has a nice spatialness to it. We get in and out, out, in. So that would be a good addition too, but it has a little bit less of the hammers, but it also it fills in a nice middle. Bring it in and out, in, out, in. So either one of those other 414s that we were looking at, the action or the bridge, could be added to this, and it sounds phase coherent to the bridge ones, and seems to be sort of adding a little bit of that attack presence. The action more so than the bridge, of course. So let's see what happens when we bring in the U87 bass and the 4050 bass in with the bridges again, starting at the top. We'll try the U87 right now. Out. In. Out. Let's try the 4050. In. Out. In. Try the 87. Now, if I think I like the 4050 better if I was going to use this. There seems to be adding an interesting sort of frequency coolness there. The 87 doesn't really seem to help me too much there. I feel like I'm getting a lot of nice low end already from my bridge ones. So I'm not feeling the lack of low end from the piano sound with the bridge mics. So if I keep the bridge mics, again, I'm going to sort of skip over these bass mics. Now, they might work better with the other 414 action and outside, and we might check that out here in a second. Let's see if we add one of these Sheps into the picture, though, and if we like it. Let's go over the chorus. Here's the cardioid in, out. Let's turn it up a little bit. In, out. In. Okay, let's try the Omni instead. Out and in. So I'm listening to that, and I like what the Sheps does for the high end of the piano. Again, I feel like that's something that's missing. When I bring that Omni in, I'm getting even more low end too, though. So if I was going to go to the cardioid Sheps, that would give me one of them. The Omni would give me both. And then I can also do some EQ with some of these to make some things happen. Sounds like everything's pretty phase coherent to me as I add microphones in and out for the most part. What I recommend doing is taking this session and listening to some combinations of these microphones with some hard left-right pans. And sort of see if you can find a magic 2 or 3, 4 microphone combination that sounds the best to you out of these, because I think you can make it a really, really good piano sound out of what we've recorded here. Yeah, mic placement, we can do a lot of things with where we place the mics in the piano. We can get lots of different sort of elements from the instrument by simply where we place the microphones and decisions that we make in how we place them into the pan spectrum as well. So enjoy the piano.